Hello, today is Friday, November 7th, and welcome to episode 524 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. I'm NSI Fellow Jessica Jones, and I'm joined today by NSI Senior Fellows Morgan Vina and Andy Kaiser. All right, folks, we were talking about an exclusive story that came out of Reuters yesterday that the U.S. may soon be establishing official military presence in Syria. It looks like Washington is preparing to open operations at a Syrian airbase, which may be part of a U.S. discussed brokered deal between Syria and Israel. That'd be quite the development after the fall last year of Assad. The new Syrian president, Ahmed al-Sharaa, is set to meet President Trump at the White House on Monday as well. That would be the first visit by a Syrian head of state in U.S. history. So if this all happens, this move might mark quite a dramatic realignment in the Middle East. We see Syria potentially moving away from Iran and Moscow. They're, traditionally friends, potentially towards Washington and Western allies. For more than a decade, Syria has been one of Iran's most important regional partners, a transit corridor. It's also hosted Russian military assets. It's Iranian and Russian friends have kind of been the backbone that kept the Assad regime propped up. So this potential U.S. military presence would be quite a break and change in things. We discussed on the show earlier, earlier this year, Trump's meeting with the new Syrian president. President Trump seems quite a fan, must be looking forward to his visit on the White House. The UN Security Council lifted sanctions actually on the Syrian president just earlier, maybe yesterday. So there's quite a bit of development here. So Morgan, I'm going to turn first to you because you're my denim sister in arms. What do you make about the timing, all of this? What is the Trump administration maybe attempting to do? Why do we see Syria open to these moves?
Thanks, Jess. Always happy to, rock the denim with you. So I will say the timing on this is remarkably speedy, right? We have seen President Sharaa go from terrorist, head of, the al-Nusra front, or a commander of the al-Nusra front, I should say, to statesman in under a year now. Like this is really fast. Not only that, but Sharaa was named as a terrorist sanctioned under the UN Security Council Resolution 1267, which specifically targets, ISIS and al-Qaeda. That was lifted, right? That process actually takes a really long time. It included a travel ban, asset freeze, an arms embargo, and now these sanctions are lifted. And so I think that President Trump clearly has a vision for the Middle East. It is one that is I think probably in his eyes an opportunity for many countries in the region to normalize relations with Israel. Andy noted in the prep that Kazakhstan just recently signed the Abraham Accords. So I think this is I think he sees this as an opportunity. At the same time, though, I think it takes a while for leopards to change their spots. I think there's a fundamental trust deficit here between many experts in the United States and globally about what Sharaa's, intent and ambitions really are. I think Israel sees this, as an opportunity. Now, keep in mind, Israel actually had a very distrustful but yet almost working relationship with the Assad regime during a few years ago. And so I am not exactly, shocked that they would pursue some type of security arrangement with Syria. At the same time, though, are we going to see Syria, sign the Abraham Accords anytime soon? Highly doubtful, right? There's a minor issue of the Golan Heights, which Syria wants back. Under the first Trump administration, we acknowledged that the Golan Heights was part of Israel. So minor detail. Of course, you've also got the issue of, the Arab Street in Syria, which is dominated by the Muslim Brotherhood and very much in support of Hamas. And so as a result of that, you're going to see a lot of protests. You're already seeing that actually. You're seeing protests against Sharaa and this security pact with Israel. And so I think we're a long way off from actually seeing any type of normalized relationship there.
Andy, Morgan has brought up perhaps, President Trump might have a new vision, a different vision for the region, for the Middle East. Do you agree with that? Morgan's raised some questions about the implementation of a new vision. Like, what do you see happening? What do you see coming out of the meeting potentially on Monday?
Yeah, I mean, certainly President Trump's on a roll in the Middle East. I think any objective observer would agree with that. There's been some fits and starts, and it's not to say that even the ceasefire in Gaza it has gone off without a hitch, but that's a pretty complicated part of the world. We mentioned the expansion of the Abraham Accords this week. That's significant. I think the president is a fan of foreign policy this term for a number of reasons. One, he doesn't have to deal with that pesky Congress or those pesky courts who sometimes slow him down or gum up the work. So he likes being able to act. He likes being a showman and hosting, as Morgan described, what was formerly a globally recognized terrorist. It's not the first time a former globally recognized terrorist has shown up in the White House. I'm thinking of Yasser Arafat with the PLA, who completely changed his stripes, at least in the eyes of the international community, had several visits to the White House. What I'm looking for, Jess, is this formalization of U.S. military presence in Syria is interesting, but of course, the U.S. military has been in Syria really for the better part of the last decade. So that's not really new, but formalizing that arrangement will be interesting. And then what happens to Russia's warm water port that the Syrian rebels are currently controlling? But that's a very significant strategic port for the Russians. It's warm water. It's on the Mediterranean, allows them to project power from a very strategic area. And assuming that remains outside of their control is a huge U.S. interest. So I'll be watching for that closely.
Yeah, and Jess, I'll just chime into that. Look, when Sharaa comes to the White House on Monday, this is an opportunity for President Trump to really hold his feet to the fire, set very clear benchmarks, particularly on counterterrorism and political inclusivity. And by that, I mean, the Kurdish integration into the military. I think it's just important for Donald Trump not to give up any leverage here and just really keep the pressure on him.
Wow, there's a lot going on. That's a wrap. Thanks so much to Kelly Crowley, Taylor Lane, Claude Jennings, and the NSI staff for the help in producing today's episode. Join us on Monday, November 10th. I can't believe we're in mid-November for another episode of Fault Lines, NSI's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. We're on YouTube, so check out Andy's cool office background. And if you like what you heard or saw, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe.